Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life challenges. This channel exists to make the profound teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus accessible and practical for your daily experiences. We believe that the timeless principles developed by these remarkable philosophers over 2,000 years ago hold the keys to navigating today's most pressing personal struggles. Today, we're tackling one of the most universal challenges you face: dealing with toxic, rude, and difficult people. Whether it's that passive-aggressive coworker who undermines every project, the family member who turns every gathering into drama, or the stranger who cuts you off in traffic while screaming obscenities, these encounters can derail your peace of mind and corrupt your character if you let them. Here's what makes this problem so persistent and frustrating. Human nature hasn't changed since the time of ancient Rome. The same types of difficult people that Marcus Aurelius encountered as emperor are walking among us today in your office buildings, apartment complexes, and social media feeds. The Stoics understood this fundamental truth. Annoying, selfish, and cruel people are not a modern phenomenon or a sign that society is declining. They're simply part of the human condition. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think the solution is to avoid these people, fight back with equal rudeness, or simply endure their behavior while building resentment. The Stoics discovered something far more powerful. They learned that difficult people are actually your greatest teachers, and that every toxic encounter is an opportunity to strengthen your character, practice virtue, and build unshakable inner peace. You're about to discover 8 ancient secrets that will completely transform how you handle every difficult person you encounter. These aren't feel-good platitudes or modern psychology techniques. These are battle-tested strategies developed by people who faced real persecution, political betrayal, and genuine life-or-death conflicts. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while surrounded by scheming politicians. Seneca navigated the treacherous court of Emperor Nero. Epictetus survived slavery and built strength through suffering. Today, you'll learn how to stop enabling negative behavior around you, why difficult people are actually your greatest teachers, and the 5 ancient rules for handling any toxic person. We'll explore how to accept disappointment without becoming cynical, master the power of having no opinion about drama, and build an inner scorecard that external criticism cannot shake. You'll discover how to set boundaries that actually protect your peace and remember the profound connection that exists between all people, even the ones who drive you crazy. 1. How to stop enabling negative behavior around you. You're sitting at your desk when you hear it again. Sarah from accounting is berating the new intern over a minor mistake. The young man's face turns red as she launches into a tirade about incompetence and wasted time. Around you, coworkers shift uncomfortably in their chairs, but everyone stays silent. You feel that familiar knot in your stomach, the one that says this isn't right, but like everyone else, you keep your head down and pretend to focus on your computer screen. This scenario plays out millions of times every day across America, and each time it happens, something important occurs that most people never recognize. Through your silence, through your inaction, through your decision to stay out of it, you become what the ancient Stoics would call complicit in the very behavior that disturbs you. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle deeply. In his personal journal, which we now call Meditations, he wrote extensively about the responsibility we bear not just for our actions, but for our inactions. He recognized that when we witness wrongdoing and choose to do nothing, we become part of the problem we claim to dislike. This isn't about becoming a workplace vigilante or inserting yourself into every conflict. This is about understanding a fundamental Stoic truth. Your character is revealed not just by what you do, but by what you allow to continue around you. Consider what happens in your mind during these moments of witness toxicity. You tell yourself reasonable-sounding stories. It's not my business. I don't want to make waves. Someone else should handle this. Or, I can't change people anyway. These thoughts feel protective and practical, but the Stoics would challenge you to examine them more deeply. What you're really doing is choosing comfort over virtue, convenience over character. The Stoic concept here isn't about dramatic confrontation or heroic intervention. It's about recognizing that you always have choices in how you respond to negative behavior around you. When you witness workplace bullying, family manipulation, or social cruelty and do nothing, you're making an active choice to enable that behavior to continue. Your silence becomes permission. Your inaction becomes complicity. Here's where this gets practical for your daily life. You don't need to become confrontational or aggressive to stop enabling negative behavior. Marcus Aurelius suggests a different approach entirely. He writes, "The best revenge is not to be like that." This means your primary responsibility is to ensure that you don't adopt the toxic behaviors you witness. But it goes deeper than personal restraint. Let's return to the workplace scenario. Instead of silent complicity, you have several Stoic options that align with virtue rather than convenience. You could approach the intern afterward and offer support or guidance. You could document the incident if your company has policies about workplace behavior. You could speak privately with Sarah about more constructive ways to address mistakes. You could even address the behavior directly in the moment by redirecting the conversation towards solutions rather than blame. The key insight that Marcus Aurelius offers is that every moment of witnessed negativity presents you with a choice about what kind of person you want to be. When you see someone being cruel to a restaurant server, dismissive to a homeless person, or manipulative in a family gathering, you're being offered an opportunity to practice virtue. Not through dramatic gestures, but through small, intentional choices that align with your values rather than your comfort. This principle extends beyond obvious conflicts into subtler forms of enabling. Think about how you respond when someone starts gossiping maliciously about a colleague. Do you listen passively, change the subject, or gently redirect toward more constructive conversation? When a family member makes cutting remarks about another family member's appearance or choices, do you laugh uncomfortably, stay silent, or find a way to shift the dynamic? Seneca, another great Stoic philosopher, emphasized that our character is built through these seemingly small moments. Each time you choose to enable negative behavior through inaction, you're training yourself to prioritize comfort over virtue. Each time you find a way to respond constructively, you're strengthening your capacity for moral courage. The practical application here requires developing what the Stoics called presence of mind. This means staying aware during social interactions, noticing when negative dynamics emerge, and having predetermined responses that align with your values. You're not trying to control other people's behavior, which would be both impossible and unstoic. You're taking responsibility for your own response to that behavior. This mindset shifts how you experience difficult social situations entirely. Instead of feeling trapped between uncomfortable silence and explosive confrontation, you begin to see a third path: constructive engagement that maintains your integrity while potentially improving the situation. When your neighbor constantly complains about the apartment complex management but never takes constructive action, you can offer to help draft a reasonable letter rather than just listening to endless griping. When your friend chronically arrives late to every gathering without apology, you can address the pattern directly rather than building silent resentment. The Stoics understood that this approach requires courage, but not the kind of dramatic heroism that most people imagine. It requires the quiet courage to act according to your principles even when it's easier to remain passive. It requires the wisdom to distinguish between situations where you can make a positive difference and those where intervention would be counterproductive. This transformation happens gradually as you practice making virtue-based choices in small moments. You start to notice opportunities everywhere to stop enabling negative behavior through thoughtful action. You realize that your character is being shaped every day through these micro-decisions about how to respond to the toxicity around you. Eventually, this practice creates something remarkable. You become the kind of person who naturally discourages negative behavior simply through your presence and responses. People begin to think twice before engaging in gossip, cruelty, or manipulation around you because they know you won't participate through passive enabling. You become a positive force that elevates the social dynamics wherever you go. In essence, stopping the enabling of negative behavior around you is about recognizing a simple but profound truth. You're always choosing what kind of person to be, and those choices happen most clearly in moments when others are choosing to be their worst selves. The Stoics discovered that these moments, uncomfortable as they may be, are precisely when your character is both revealed and developed. 2. Why difficult people are your greatest teachers. You walk into your Monday morning team meeting, and there he is again, David, your micromanaging boss who questions every decision you make, interrupts your presentations, and seems to take personal pleasure in pointing out minor flaws in your work. Your stomach tightens as he starts his usual routine of nitpicking the quarterly report you spent all weekend perfecting. Around the conference table, you see the familiar looks of resignation and frustration on your colleagues' faces. Everyone dreads these interactions with David, but what if you're all missing something profound about this situation? Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with his share of difficult people as Roman emperor, discovered something revolutionary about these challenging encounters. In his personal writings, he developed what might be the most powerful reframe in all of Stoic philosophy. He wrote, "In a sense, people are our proper occupation. Our job is to do them good and put up with them. But here's the part that transforms everything." He goes on to explain that when difficult people obstruct our plans, they actually become opportunities for us to practice the highest virtues. This isn't just philosophical theory. It's a practical framework that changes how you experience every toxic person in your life. Think about what happens in your mind when David starts his criticism routine. Your natural response involves frustration, defensive thoughts, maybe some internal cursing, and probably fantasies about finding a new job. But Marcus Aurelius suggests that this entire experience is actually a gift in disguise, though not for the reasons you might expect. The emperor discovered that difficult people serve as your personal virtue training gym. Every time David interrupts you, you get to practice patience. Every time he questions your competence, you get to practice confidence that doesn't depend on his approval. Every time he creates unnecessary stress, you get to practice the Stoic discipline of maintaining inner calm regardless of external circumstances. Without David and people like him, you would never develop these crucial life skills. Epictetus, who understood suffering as a former slave, taught this principle even more directly. He said that every person who angers or frustrates you is actually teaching you where your freedom ends and your attachments begin. When David's behavior ruins your mood, he's showing you that you've made your peace of mind dependent on his approval or behavior. When his criticism makes you doubt yourself, he's revealing that your self-worth is tied to external validation rather than internal virtue. Here's where this becomes practically transformative for your daily life. Instead of seeing David as an obstacle to your happiness, you start recognizing him as your greatest teacher for developing unshakable inner strength. Every difficult interaction becomes a classroom where you're learning skills that will serve you for the rest of your life. Emotional resilience, clear communication under pressure, maintaining dignity when others lose theirs, and finding peace regardless of external chaos. Consider how this reframe changes your entire approach to the situation. When David starts his usual Monday morning critique, instead of mentally preparing for battle, you think, here's my opportunity to practice staying calm and confident. Instead of taking his comments personally, you ask yourself, what virtue can I practice right now? Instead of letting his behavior determine your emotional state, you use his negativity as a prompt to strengthen your inner foundation. This transformation extends far beyond workplace scenarios. Think about that family member who always brings drama to holiday gatherings. The Stoic perspective reveals that they're actually providing you with intensive training in maintaining peace and compassion under pressure. The friend who constantly cancels plans is teaching you about managing expectations and not building your happiness on other people's reliability. The neighbor who plays loud music is offering you lessons in patience and choosing your battles wisely. Seneca emphasized that this approach requires a fundamental shift in how you define problems and solutions. Most people see difficult people as problems to be solved, avoided, or endured. Stoics see them as opportunities to be embraced, learned from, and used for character development. This isn't about becoming a doormat or accepting abuse. It's about using inevitable challenging encounters as fuel for your personal growth. The practical application involves developing what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of perception. When David launches into his criticism, you consciously reframe the experience in real time. You think, this is my chance to practice staying centered. When he interrupts your presentation, you see it as training for maintaining confidence under pressure. When he questions your decisions, you view it as practice for explaining your reasoning clearly and calmly. This approach creates something remarkable over time. As you consistently use difficult people as virtue practice opportunities, you develop genuine confidence that doesn't depend on other people's behavior. You become someone who stays calm in chaos, speaks clearly under pressure, and maintains dignity regardless of how others treat you. The very people who once triggered your worst responses become the catalysts for your best qualities. The most profound aspect of this teaching is that it makes you grateful for difficult people rather than resentful toward them. You start to appreciate that without challenges, you would remain weak and untested. Without David's micromanaging, you might never develop the skill of staying confident under scrutiny. Without dramatic family members, you might never learn to maintain peace in chaotic situations. This perspective also reveals why avoiding difficult people actually limits your growth. When you only interact with people who are easy to get along with, you never develop the robust character traits that life inevitably demands. Difficult people force you to become stronger, more patient, more creative in your responses, and more resilient in your spirit. Therefore, the next time you encounter someone whose behavior triggers frustration or anger, remember Marcus Aurelius's insight. They are not obstacles to your peace and happiness. They are your greatest teachers for developing both. 3. The 5 ancient rules for handling any toxic person. You're standing in the break room when Jennifer walks in, and immediately the atmosphere changes. She's the office complainer who turns every conversation into a catalog of grievances about management, co-workers, and life in general. Within seconds, she launches into her latest tirade about how the new project deadlines are completely unrealistic and how nobody around here appreciates good work anymore. You feel that familiar tension as you realize you're trapped in another one of her negative spirals. But what if you had a clear, systematic approach for handling this exact situation? The ancient Stoics developed what amounts to a comprehensive tactical manual for dealing with difficult people. Through centuries of practical application, from the slave quarters where Epictetus learned his philosophy to the imperial palace where Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, these 5 rules emerged as the most effective approach for maintaining your peace and virtue while navigating toxic personalities. The first ancient rule: give them the benefit of the doubt. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that you must recognize in every wrongdoer a nature similar to your own. This first rule requires you to approach difficult people with the assumption that their behavior stems from their own pain, confusion, or limitation rather than inherent evil. When Jennifer starts her complaining routine, instead of immediately judging her as a negative person, you consider what might be driving her behavior. Perhaps she feels overwhelmed, undervalued, or genuinely stressed about meeting unrealistic expectations. This approach doesn't mean accepting poor behavior or making excuses for toxicity. Rather, it means starting from a place of common humanity that prevents you from demonizing people and escalating conflicts unnecessarily. When you give someone the benefit of the doubt, you maintain your own inner peace because you're not carrying anger or resentment. You also create space for more constructive interactions because you're approaching them as a fellow human being facing challenges rather than as an enemy to be defeated. The second ancient rule: accept that difficult people are part of life. Epictetus taught his students to begin each day by mentally preparing for the challenging people they would inevitably encounter. He suggested waking up and telling yourself that you will meet people who are selfish, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This isn't pessimism. It's practical preparation that prevents you from being shocked or thrown off balance when you encounter difficult behavior. When you apply this rule to Jennifer's negativity, you stop being surprised or personally affected by her complaints. You expected to encounter difficult people today, and here she is, playing exactly the role you anticipated. This mental preparation transforms your experience from unexpected frustration to an anticipated challenge that you're ready to handle with grace and wisdom. The third ancient rule: live well as your revenge. Marcus Aurelius discovered that the most powerful response to toxic behavior is simply refusing to become like the person who's treating you poorly. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like that." This rule focuses your energy on maintaining your own character rather than trying to change or punish difficult people. In the break room with Jennifer, this means you don't respond to her negativity with your own complaints or gossip. You don't let her drag you into a spiral of workplace criticism. Instead, you maintain your own positive approach, perhaps by acknowledging her concerns without joining in, redirecting the conversation toward solutions, or simply maintaining friendly but brief interactions. Your consistent good character becomes a powerful contrast to her negativity. The fourth ancient rule: practice strategic indifference. The Stoics taught that you should be indifferent to things that make no real difference in your life. Marcus Aurelius advised focusing only on what truly matters and letting everything else pass by like clouds in the sky. This rule helps you determine when to engage with difficult behavior and when to simply let it exist without affecting you. With Jennifer's complaining, you practice strategic indifference by recognizing that her negative attitude doesn't actually impact your ability to do good work, maintain relationships with colleagues, or find satisfaction in your job. Her complaints are like background noise that you can acknowledge without letting it disturb your inner peace. You neither fight against her negativity nor absorb it. You simply let it be while maintaining your own centered approach. The fifth ancient rule: zoom out to cosmic perspective. The final rule involves what Marcus Aurelius called taking the view from above. He regularly practiced imagining situations from a vast distance, seeing how small and temporary most conflicts appear when viewed from the perspective of years, decades, or centuries. This cosmic perspective helps you maintain proportion and avoid getting swept up in the drama of the moment. When Jennifer launches into her complaints, you mentally zoom out and see the situation from a broader perspective. In 5 years, will this conversation matter? In the context of your entire life and career, how significant is this moment of workplace negativity? This perspective doesn't minimize genuine problems that need addressing, but it helps you distinguish between momentary irritations and truly important challenges. Integrating the 5 rules. These 5 ancient rules work together as a complete system. You give Jennifer the benefit of the doubt while accepting that her negativity is a predictable part of workplace life. You maintain your own positive character while practicing strategic indifference to complaints that don't actually affect your work or happiness. When you feel yourself getting drawn into her drama, you zoom out to cosmic perspective and remember that this moment is temporary and ultimately insignificant. The beauty of this systematic approach is that it works with any difficult person you encounter, from family members who create holiday drama to neighbors who blast music at inappropriate hours. The 5 rules provide a reliable framework that protects your peace while maintaining your character, regardless of how others choose to behave. 4. How to accept that some people will always disappoint you. You've been friends with Mike since college, and for 15 years you've watched the same pattern repeat itself. He promises to meet you for dinner, then cancels 2 hours before with some excuse about work or family emergencies. He says he'll help you move apartments, then shows up 3 hours late when you've already finished loading the truck. He commits to being your best man, then disappears for 2 weeks before your wedding, leaving you scrambling to find a replacement. Every time he apologizes profusely, swears it won't happen again, and somehow convinces you to give him another chance. And every time, you feel that familiar sting of disappointment mixed with your own frustration at yourself for expecting different results. This cycle of hope and disappointment represents one of the most emotionally draining aspects of dealing with difficult people. Unlike openly hostile individuals whose behavior you can easily dismiss, chronically disappointing people like Mike create a special kind of suffering because they keep you trapped between hope and reality. They're not evil enough to cut out of your life completely, but they're not reliable enough to depend on consistently. Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge as Roman emperor, surrounded by senators, generals, and advisors who regularly failed to meet his expectations. Rather than allowing these disappointments to embitter him or consume his emotional energy, he developed a profound insight that can transform how you experience unreliable people in your own life. In his personal writings, he reminds himself that disappointment comes not from people's behavior, but from his expectations about their behavior. The emperor discovered that accepting certain people will always disappoint you isn't about becoming cynical or giving up on humanity. It's about aligning your expectations with reality so that you can maintain relationships without constantly suffering emotional whiplash. When you truly accept that Mike will probably cancel plans, show up late, or fail to follow through on commitments, you stop being surprised or hurt when it happens. More importantly, you stop wasting emotional energy on hoping he'll suddenly become someone he's never been. This acceptance process begins with understanding what the Stoics called the nature of things. Just as you don't get angry at rain for being wet or fire for being hot, you can learn to stop being angry at unreliable people for being unreliable. Mike's chronic lateness and cancellations aren't personal attacks on you. They're expressions of his character, his priorities, and his relationship with commitment. Recognizing this pattern as simply part of who he is removes the emotional sting of disappointment. But here's where this teaching becomes more nuanced than simple resignation. Accepting that some people will always disappoint you doesn't mean tolerating behavior that genuinely harms your life or relationships. Marcus Aurelius distinguished between accepting people's nature and enabling their poor choices to negatively impact your well-being. You can accept that Mike is unreliable while also protecting yourself from the consequences of his unreliability. This protection involves what the Stoics called practical wisdom, making decisions based on people's demonstrated patterns rather than their promised intentions. When Mike offers to help with an important project, you can appreciate his gesture while having backup plans in place. When he invites you to dinner, you can enjoy the possibility while not rearranging your entire evening around his commitment. You learn to engage with disappointing people in ways that acknowledge their limitations while protecting your own peace and plans. The transformation this creates in your relationships is remarkable. Instead of constantly feeling frustrated with Mike's behavior, you start approaching interactions with realistic expectations and appropriate boundaries. You might still grab dinner with him occasionally, but you stop expecting him to be your reliable support system for important events. You appreciate the positive aspects of your friendship while accepting its limitations without resentment. Seneca emphasized that this acceptance actually makes you a better friend to disappointing people because you stop trying to force them to be someone they're not. When you accept Mike's unreliability, you stop nagging him about punctuality, stop expressing disappointment when he cancels, and stop making him feel guilty for being himself. Paradoxically, this often improves the relationship because you're no longer creating pressure and conflict around his behavior patterns. This principle extends beyond individual relationships into your broader experience of humanity. The Stoics understood that disappointment often comes from having unrealistic expectations about human nature itself. When you accept that some people will always be selfish, some will always be dishonest, and some will always be unreliable, you stop being shocked by behavior that's actually quite predictable. You develop what Marcus Aurelius called a realistic view of humanity that allows you to engage with people as they are rather than as you wish they were. The practice of acceptance also reveals something profound about your own character development. When you stop wasting emotional energy on disappointment and frustration, you have more resources available for positive relationships and meaningful activities. You become more selective about where you invest your trust and expectations, which naturally leads you toward more reliable and fulfilling connections. This doesn't mean becoming isolated or suspicious of everyone. Rather, it means developing the wisdom to recognize patterns, set appropriate expectations, and protect your emotional well-being while still maintaining compassion for people's limitations. You can love Mike while accepting he'll always be late. You can care about your chronically negative coworker while not expecting them to become optimistic. You can maintain family relationships while accepting that certain relatives will always create drama. Ultimately, accepting that some people will always disappoint you is about developing emotional maturity that allows you to engage with reality rather than fighting against it, creating space for genuine peace and more authentic relationships. 5. The power of having no opinion about drama. You're scrolling through social media during your lunch break when you see it. A heated argument erupting in your neighborhood Facebook group about the new bike lanes. Dozens of comments are flying back and forth, with neighbors you've known for years hurling insults about everything from political affiliations to personal intelligence. Your finger hovers over the keyboard as you feel the familiar urge to jump in with your own perspective. After all, you have strong feelings about urban planning, and some of these comments are completely wrong. But then you pause and ask yourself a question that Marcus Aurelius would have recognized immediately. Do I actually need to have an opinion about this? This moment of pause represents one of the most powerful yet underutilized tools in the Stoic arsenal for handling toxic situations. Marcus Aurelius discovered that most of the drama, conflict, and negativity that disturbs our peace exists only because we choose to form opinions about things that ultimately don't require our mental engagement. In his personal writings, he reminds himself repeatedly that he always has the power of having no opinion about situations that don't directly concern him or fall within his sphere of influence. Understanding this concept requires recognizing the difference between things that genuinely require your attention and judgment versus things that simply present themselves for your consideration. The neighborhood bike lane argument falls into the second category for most people. Unless you're a city planner, transportation engineer, or someone whose daily commute will be significantly affected, this debate doesn't actually require your intellectual or emotional investment. Yet most people automatically form strong opinions about such issues simply because they're presented with information about them. The Stoic practice of strategic opinion management begins with developing what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, learning to want only what's actually within your control and influence. When you see the social media argument unfolding, you can recognize it as an opportunity to practice this discipline. Instead of automatically engaging your opinion-forming machinery, you consciously choose to let the entire debate exist without your mental participation. You're not ignoring important issues or being apathetic about your community. You're strategically preserving your emotional energy for matters where your opinion can actually make a positive difference. This approach becomes transformational when you apply it consistently across the various dramas that compete for your attention throughout each day. Consider how much mental energy you typically spend forming opinions about celebrity scandals, political controversies in distant states, workplace gossip about departments you don't work with, or family drama between relatives you rarely see. Each of these situations pulls you into emotional investment that provides no practical benefit while depleting the psychological resources you need for your actual responsibilities and relationships. The practice of having no opinion isn't about intellectual laziness or social disengagement. Rather, it's about conscious curation of your mental space. Marcus Aurelius understood that your mind is like a garden. You can either let every random seed that blows and take root, or you can deliberately choose which plants deserve your soil, water, and attention. When you form an opinion about something, you're allocating precious cognitive resources to that topic. The Stoics discovered that most people waste enormous amounts of mental energy on topics that provide no practical return on that investment. Implementing this practice requires developing what you might think of as opinion triage skills. When presented with any situation that seems to demand your judgment, you quickly assess whether this falls into the category of things that genuinely require your mental engagement. Does this situation directly affect your life, your responsibilities, or your ability to help others? Do you have sufficient information to form a meaningful opinion? Can your opinion actually influence the outcome in a positive direction? If the answer to these questions is no, you practice the liberating discipline of simply letting the situation exist without your mental participation. This approach creates remarkable changes in your daily emotional experience. Instead of feeling constantly triggered by news events, social media arguments, workplace gossip, and family drama, you develop a kind of serene selectivity about where you invest your emotional energy. You stop feeling obligated to have positions on every controversial topic or to engage with every conflict that presents itself for your consideration. The benefits extend beyond personal peace into improved relationships and more effective engagement with issues that actually matter. When you stop wasting emotional energy on irrelevant drama, you have more resources available for the people and situations that truly deserve your attention. Your family members get a more present and emotionally available version of you because you're not mentally exhausted from arguing about bike lanes with strangers on the internet. Perhaps most importantly, this practice helps you recognize the difference between genuine problems that require action and artificial problems that exist mainly to consume your attention. The bike lane debate might represent a real urban planning challenge, but for most people, it's simply drama that provides the illusion of meaningful engagement while actually preventing you from focusing on the areas of life where you can make real positive changes. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that having no opinion doesn't mean being uninformed or uncommitted to important causes. It means being intentional about where you direct your limited mental and emotional resources, ensuring that your engagement serves your actual values and responsibilities rather than simply responding to whatever drama happens to cross your path. 6. How to build an inner scorecard that can't be shaken. You're sitting in the annual performance review meeting with your manager, Janet, who's known throughout the company for her unpredictable feedback style. Last year, she criticized you for being too detail-oriented. But this year she's complaining that you lack attention to detail. As she speaks, you feel that familiar knot forming in your stomach, the one that appears whenever someone else's opinion threatens to reshape how you see yourself. Your mind starts racing. Maybe you really aren't good at your job. Maybe you've been fooling yourself about your abilities. Maybe you should reconsider your entire career path. But what if there was a way to receive feedback without having your self-worth constantly fluctuate based on other people's ever-changing opinions? Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge on a massive scale as Roman emperor. Senators criticized his military strategies, citizens questioned his policies, and even his own advisors sometimes doubted his decisions. Yet, in his personal writings, we see a man who maintained remarkable stability in his sense of self despite constant external evaluation. He developed what modern thinkers might call an internal scorecard, a system for measuring his own worth and progress that remained independent of others' opinions. Building an unshakable inner scorecard begins with understanding the fundamental difference between external validation and internal standards. External validation means allowing other people's opinions, reactions, and judgments to determine how you feel about yourself and your choices. Internal standards mean developing your own criteria for success, progress, and self-worth based on your values, effort, and character rather than others' perceptions. Think about how this applies to Janet's contradictory feedback. If you're operating from external validation, her criticism becomes devastating because it suggests you're failing at something important. But if you have strong internal standards, you can evaluate her feedback objectively while maintaining confidence in your own assessment of your work quality. You might think, Janet seems frustrated about something, and her feedback is inconsistent with last year's comments and with my own careful self-evaluation. I'll consider whether there's anything useful here, but I won't let her mood determine my self-worth. The process of building internal standards requires developing what Seneca called self-knowledge, a clear understanding of your own values, strengths, areas for improvement, and long-term goals. This self-knowledge becomes the foundation for your personal scorecard. Instead of measuring yourself by whether Janet approves of your work style, you measure yourself by criteria that actually matter. Are you learning and growing in your role? Are you contributing positively to your team? Are you maintaining integrity in your professional relationships? And are you developing skills that align with your career aspirations? Creating these internal measurements involves regular self-reflection that the Stoics practiced systematically. Each evening, Marcus Aurelius would review his day not based on whether others praised or criticized him, but based on whether he had acted according to his principles. You can develop a similar practice by regularly asking yourself questions that reflect your true priorities. Did I do my best work today? Regardless of whether anyone noticed? Did I treat colleagues with respect and kindness? Did I learn something new or make progress on important projects? And did I handle challenges in ways that reflect my character? This internal scorecard becomes particularly powerful when dealing with criticism or praise that feels disproportionate to reality. When Janet gives you contradictory feedback, your inner scorecard allows you to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively. You can appreciate any valid points she makes while recognizing that her opinion is just one data point among many. You neither dismiss her feedback entirely nor allow it to destabilize your self-confidence. You maintain what the Stoics called equanimity, emotional balance that persists regardless of external circumstances. The practical benefits of this approach extend far beyond workplace scenarios. Think about how an inner scorecard changes your experience of social media, where external validation often comes in the form of likes, comments, and shares. Instead of measuring the worth of your posts by how many people react to them, you measure them by whether they reflect your authentic thoughts, contribute something positive to your network, or help you connect meaningfully with friends and family. Building this internal system also protects you from the emotional manipulation that some difficult people use intentionally. Consider how toxic individuals often alternate between excessive praise and harsh criticism to keep others emotionally dependent on their approval. When your boss compliments your work one day and tears it apart the next, or when a family member praises you publicly but criticizes you privately, these tactics lose their power over you because your self-worth isn't tied to their fluctuating opinions. The development of an inner scorecard requires patience because it goes against cultural conditioning that teaches us to seek external validation from childhood onward. You've been trained to look to teachers, parents, bosses, and peers for confirmation of your worth and progress. Developing internal standards means gradually shifting this dependency inward while still remaining open to useful feedback and genuine connection with others. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that this inner scorecard isn't about arrogance or dismissing all external input. Rather, it's about developing sufficient self-knowledge and confidence that you can engage with others' opinions from a position of strength rather than need. You can appreciate genuine compliments without becoming addicted to praise, and you can consider valid criticism without having your entire self-concept destabilized by someone else's bad mood or poor judgment. Building an inner scorecard that can't be shaken ultimately creates the freedom to engage authentically with the world because your sense of self doesn't depend on controlling other people's reactions to you. 7. How to set boundaries that actually protect your peace. You're having dinner with your family when your sister Lisa starts her familiar routine. She begins by asking innocent questions about your job, then gradually escalates to pointed criticisms about your career choices, your relationship status, and your lifestyle decisions. Within 20 minutes, she's managed to make you feel defensive, frustrated, and emotionally drained. You want to maintain a loving relationship with her, but these interactions consistently leave you feeling attacked and misunderstood. Every family gathering follows the same pattern, and you find yourself dreading events that should bring joy. The question that haunts you afterward is always the same. How can you protect your emotional well-being without cutting off people you care about? This scenario illustrates one of the most challenging aspects of dealing with difficult people: maintaining relationships while protecting your inner peace. Unlike strangers or acquaintances whose behavior you can simply dismiss, family members and close friends require a more nuanced approach that balances love with self-preservation. The ancient Stoics understood this challenge intimately and developed sophisticated strategies for what Seneca called maintaining both dignity and compassion in difficult relationships. Setting boundaries that actually protect your peace begins with understanding what boundaries really are versus what most people think they are. Many people approach boundaries as attempts to control other people's behavior, essentially trying to make Lisa stop being critical or manipulative during family dinners. But this approach fails because it violates the fundamental Stoic principle that you cannot control other people's actions, only your own responses to those actions. True Stoic boundaries focus entirely on what you will and won't do in various situations, rather than trying to dictate what others should do. This means developing clear internal guidelines about how you'll respond when Lisa starts her critical routine. You might decide that you'll redirect the conversation once, and if she continues, you'll excuse yourself from the room. Or you might establish that you'll listen to her concerns for exactly 5 minutes, then change the subject to something positive. The key insight is that you're setting rules for your own behavior rather than attempting to control hers. Seneca emphasized that effective boundaries require what he called self-contained strength, the ability to remain centered and dignified regardless of how others choose to behave around you. This internal stability allows you to engage with difficult people from a position of choice rather than reaction. When Lisa starts criticizing your career, instead of automatically becoming defensive or argumentative, you can consciously choose how to respond based on your predetermined boundaries rather than your emotional impulses. The practical implementation of these boundaries requires developing what the Stoics called presence of mind during challenging interactions. This means staying aware of your emotional state and your established limits even when someone is pushing your buttons. When you feel that familiar frustration rising during Lisa's criticism, that's your cue to implement your boundary rather than getting swept into the drama. You might say something like, I can see you have concerns about my choices, but I'd prefer to focus on enjoying our time together. How was your trip to Seattle last month? Understanding the difference between boundaries and walls represents another crucial aspect of this practice. Walls are defensive barriers that shut people out completely, while boundaries are selective filters that allow positive connection while blocking harmful behavior. You're not trying to eliminate Lisa from your life or refuse all interaction with her. You're creating a framework that allows you to maintain the relationship while protecting yourself from the aspects of her behavior that consistently cause you distress. This approach requires developing comfort with what Seneca called the temporary discomfort of enforcement. When you first start implementing boundaries, difficult people often escalate their behavior to test whether you're serious about your new limits. Lisa might become more critical when you redirect conversations or express hurt feelings when you excuse yourself from negative interactions. The Stoics understood that this testing phase is normal and temporary. Most people eventually adjust to your new boundaries once they realize you're consistent about maintaining them. The compassionate aspect of Stoic boundary setting involves recognizing that your boundaries often serve the other person as well as yourself. When you stop enabling Lisa's critical behavior by engaging defensively with it, you're actually helping her develop better relationship skills. When you consistently redirect conversations toward positive topics, you're modeling more constructive ways to connect. Your boundaries become a form of gentle teaching that encourages better behavior without being preachy or confrontational. Advanced boundary implementation involves developing what Marcus Aurelius called strategic engagement, knowing when to fully participate in interactions and when to maintain emotional distance while physically present. During family dinners, you might engage enthusiastically when conversations focus on shared interests or positive topics, but maintain polite detachment when discussions turn toxic. This selective engagement protects your energy while still allowing for genuine connection during the healthier moments. The long-term benefits of this approach extend beyond individual relationships into your overall quality of life. When you consistently maintain boundaries that protect your peace, you develop confidence in your ability to handle any social situation. You stop avoiding family gatherings or social events because you know you have effective tools for managing difficult behavior. This confidence actually makes you more generous and compassionate because you're engaging from a position of strength rather than vulnerability. Consequently, boundaries that actually protect your peace transform both your relationships and your character, creating space for authentic connection while maintaining your emotional well-being. 8. Why remembering we're all connected transforms relationships. You're standing in the grocery store checkout line when the person in front of you starts berating the teenage cashier over a pricing error. The customer's voice grows louder and more aggressive as he demands to speak to a manager, accusing the young employee of incompetence and threatening to never shop there again. You watch the cashier's face turn red with embarrassment and frustration, and you feel that familiar surge of anger toward the hostile customer. Your immediate instinct is to categorize him as a terrible person, maybe even consider intervening to defend the cashier. But what if this moment of witnessed cruelty could actually become an opportunity to practice one of the most profound teachings in all of Stoic philosophy? Marcus Aurelius spent considerable time developing what he called cosmic perspective, the ability to see individual human behaviors within the context of our shared humanity and universal connection. This wasn't abstract philosophical theorizing for the emperor. He used this perspective as a practical tool for dealing with the senators who opposed his policies, the generals who questioned his military strategies, and the citizens who criticized his leadership. Rather than allowing difficult people to fragment his sense of human community, he consciously cultivated awareness of the invisible threads that connect all people, even those who seem most different from us. The foundation of this cosmic perspective begins with recognizing that every person you encounter, including the angry customer berating the cashier, is struggling with the same fundamental human challenges that you face. Behind his aggressive behavior lies someone dealing with fears, disappointments, pressures, and limitations that are essentially similar to your own. Perhaps he's facing financial stress that makes every unexpected expense feel threatening. Maybe he's dealing with health problems that create constant irritability. Possibly he learned this aggressive communication style from parents who treated him similarly when he was young and vulnerable. This recognition doesn't excuse his poor behavior or eliminate the need for appropriate boundaries. The cashier shouldn't have to tolerate abuse, and someone should probably intervene if the situation escalates. But remembering our shared humanity transforms how you experience this encounter internally. Instead of seeing a monster attacking an innocent victim, you begin to see a fellow human being whose pain has temporarily overwhelmed his capacity for kindness and consideration. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced what he called meditation on the interconnectedness of all things. He would remind himself that every person shares the same basic needs for safety, connection, meaning, and dignity. When you apply this meditation to the grocery store scenario, you realize that both the angry customer and the embarrassed cashier want to feel respected and valued. The customer's aggression stems from feeling disrespected by what he perceives as poor service, while the cashier's distress comes from being treated as less than human. Both are seeking the same fundamental human experience of dignity, just expressing it in very different ways. This understanding creates space for a response that honors everyone's humanity while still addressing the problematic behavior. Instead of internally condemning the customer as irredeemably awful, you might approach the situation with what Seneca called compassionate firmness. You could gently redirect his attention by acknowledging his frustration while protecting the cashier. "I can see you're frustrated about the pricing issue. The manager should be able to help resolve this quickly, so everyone can have a better experience." The practice of remembering universal connection becomes particularly powerful when dealing with people who have hurt you personally. Consider someone who has betrayed your trust, criticized you unfairly, or treated you with cruelty. Your natural response involves creating emotional distance by emphasizing how different you are from them, how you would never behave so poorly, how you have better character, how you don't understand how anyone could act that way. This mental separation provides temporary emotional protection, but it also cuts you off from one of the most healing aspects of human experience: the recognition of shared vulnerability and imperfection. When you consciously remember that the person who hurt you is fundamentally similar to you, something remarkable happens to your internal experience. The burning anger that consumes emotional energy begins to transform into something more manageable and ultimately more useful. This doesn't mean accepting poor treatment or abandoning appropriate boundaries. Rather, it means approaching difficult people from a place of recognized common humanity rather than from a position of moral superiority. This shift in perspective creates practical benefits that extend throughout your relationships. When you consistently practice seeing difficult people as fellow humans struggling with their own limitations rather than as enemies to be defeated, you develop genuine confidence that doesn't depend on being better than others. You become someone who can address problematic behavior without losing sight of the person behind that behavior. The transformation becomes most apparent in how this practice affects your capacity for forgiveness and healing. When someone has hurt you, remembering your shared humanity doesn't require immediate forgiveness or reconciliation, but it does create space for eventually releasing the resentment that otherwise poisons your own emotional well-being. You realize that holding on to anger towards someone who shares your basic human struggles ultimately hurts you more than it affects them. Ultimately, remembering our universal connection transforms relationships by helping you approach every interaction from a foundation of recognized common humanity rather than from positions of judgment and separation. Your complete Stoic system for toxic people mastery. You now possess 8 ancient secrets that have the power to completely transform how you experience every difficult person in your life. These aren't just philosophical concepts to contemplate. They form a complete system that works together to create unshakable inner peace, regardless of how others choose to behave around you. Think about how these strategies build upon each other to create comprehensive mastery. When you stop enabling negative behavior around you, you take the first crucial step toward personal responsibility and virtue. When you recognize that difficult people are actually your greatest teachers, you transform every challenging encounter from a source of frustration into an opportunity for character development. The 5 ancient rules give you specific tactical approaches that work in any situation, while accepting that some people will always disappoint you protects you from the emotional exhaustion of unrealistic expectations. The power of having no opinion about drama preserves your mental energy for what truly matters, while building an inner scorecard that can't be shaken creates independence from external validation. Setting boundaries that actually protect your peace allows you to maintain relationships while safeguarding your well-being, and remembering our universal connection ensures that your strength comes from compassion rather than judgment. This system works because it addresses the complete spectrum of challenges that toxic people present. Some difficult individuals require firm boundaries, others need patient redirection, and still others benefit from strategic disengagement. The beauty of Stoic philosophy is that it provides you with flexible tools that adapt to any personality type or situation, while maintaining your core principles of virtue and inner peace. The most remarkable aspect of implementing this system is how it changes not just your relationships, but your entire character. As you consistently practice these 8 principles, you develop genuine confidence that doesn't depend on other people's behavior. You become someone who stays calm in chaos, responds thoughtfully under pressure, and maintains dignity regardless of how others treat you. People begin to notice something different about your presence, a kind of unshakable centeredness that naturally discourages toxic behavior while encouraging more positive interactions. Remember that mastering these ancient secrets requires consistent practice over time. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus developed these insights through years of applying Stoic principles to real-world challenges. Start by choosing 1 or 2 strategies that resonate most strongly with your current situations, then gradually incorporate the others as these become natural habits. The toxic people in your life aren't going anywhere, but your experience of them can transform completely. Instead of being at the mercy of others' moods and behaviors, you can become a source of stability and positive influence in every relationship and interaction. If this content has provided value for your journey towards Stoic mastery, please subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel for more ancient wisdom applied to modern life challenges. Like this content if it resonated with you, share it with friends and family who might benefit from these timeless teachings, and leave a comment about which strategy you're most excited to implement in your own life. Your engagement helps us continue bringing practical Stoic philosophy to people who need these tools for navigating an increasingly complex world.